Okay, well, good morning everyone. Are there any questions before we start? Yes, go ahead. You are asking about the third problem in the homework. Let me, I did print out the homework, so oh here, problem 3. Okay, so I go ahead.
Do we assume the input to be x0, x0 bar, x1, x1 bar?
Oh, okay, so the question that you are asking in this interleaved 8-point FFT. Okay, so how can, what should be the input format? And that's a good question, because I don't think I clearly mentioned that, but I think the intent was to have the FFT, so the input x and x prime are input in two different wires like that. These are two channels. You can think of them as two time series or two channels. So that was the intent. Okay.
This is not interleaved.
Oh, these well, okay. I mean, well, okay. So okay, how do you interleave? Well, if we are going to interleave two different time series, we should have two different time series coming from two different sources, sensed by two different sensors, and then we interleave the computations. So the interleaving of the computations is going on in the data path, and if we look at these, so for example, these prime computations, these belong to one time series and this is another time series, and this is where they are interleaved in the data path. But the time series themselves have to be sensed by two different sensors, whatever the sensors are. Thermometer sensor, sensing temperature, sensing your brain activity by electroencephalogram, heartbeat or whatever. Okay. Well, anyway, that was the intent. The intent is, and you will have some circuits that will put them into the right format. Did you try this or you did not?
Not this way. I assume the inputs should be x0, x0 bar, x1, x1 bar, then format converter.
So you are assuming a sequential, I see. Well, obviously, yeah, I didn't mention very clearly, but that was the intent. I should have given you more instructions. But the inside of the FFT won't change, only the input converter part will change. So you can revisit that. It's not due till Thursday. So, okay, good. Any other questions?
And
Yeah.
Here A0 bar means the first inputs should be x0 bar, x4 bar, like that.
Okay, yeah, that's so I think the, yeah, so if the time series x, you can simply assume the inputs are in order, x0, x1, x2, x3, x4, whatever, and this is x0 prime, x1 prime, x2 prime, so on. Is that what you are asking? But you said something else. You did not say what I am writing down.
I meant the folding side.
Yeah.
What does A0 bar mean?
A0 prime. A0 prime corresponds to the computation of FFT of the samples belonging to x prime. So x and x prime, okay, a lot of things I suppose I didn't make it clear. X and x prime are two different time series. And I guess if both of these are 8 point, we take 8 points, compute FFT, next 8, etc. So A computations are computing the FFT of the time series x, A prime, B prime, C prime are computing for the x prime.
But both A0 and A0 prime are done with the same hardware, right?
Oh yeah, A is one hardware, A is one folding set. So A is one, that's where the interleaving is happening. Yes. So if you recall, the feed forward architecture was half utilized, and this having 2 time series is going to fill up those null cycles, and it will now be fully utilized. Okay, any other questions? Yeah. Yes.
Problem number 6. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, from the paper in the paper the figure 2,
Mm-hmm.
we use that time notation provided
Yes.
a flow graph. So in that there are few computations where there's no butterflies there.
Okay.
So should we in the DFG should we use the same notation, the node notation? Like if you are using B0, B1, B2, B3 to indicate the butterflies,
Yeah.
then can we use the same nodes to indicate those append operations?
Well, let's see. Well, I mean, why you are saying there are no butterflies? I mean, unless you are talking about the Tweedle factor itself, that's a separate thing. But every stage, I mean, there are 16 point FFT, there are butterfly stage 1, 2, 3, and 4.
There are light butterflies, right?
What?
Just the append operations, they are not doing anything you told. Like
Yeah?
even those are considered as butterflies. What is asking?
No, but those, if you look carefully, I think those were mentioned. Well, I think the append operations are shown like this. Yeah, that's no butterfly. But that may be. But when you map this whole block to one hardware data path, the hardware data path should have the ability to configure itself either as a butterfly or just passing the signals, and that's probably what was happening here, right? So this is a control signal. So it either computes the butterfly or just passes in 1 and in 2 in this muxes here. Is that what you were asking? Yeah. There is a lot where papers like this, there is a tremendous amount of detail that is missing, and the whole purpose of you have the solution in front of you, so your job is to really start with this and then derive this and then do the mapping and get this data path. So that's kind of the whole intent was to get you ready for the project. Talking about project, I have asked you to give me your 3 top choices by Friday. I have asked Friday because by Thursday all of you have turned in homework. You know what is involved in each part, and the project is essentially doing that same thing, but now through Verilog and deriving the control circuits, designing the counter, and all of those details. Okay. There are also some reading exercises. So if somebody who doesn't want to do Verilog wants to do some reading and write a paper, read 5-6 papers. The thing about research is when you start reading a paper, then you quickly see that you need to read 5 other papers to understand that paper. And that's why you go to the references and look at those papers, and so that's how research is supposed to be. These days life is very, very easy because you have the entire set of papers from all possible publishers available to you without going anywhere. And let me tell you that when I was doing my PhD, every day I had to take a card from the department and copy 10 or 15 papers from the engineering library. We had no IEEE Explore, no soft copies, so we have to go to the library, look at those bulky journals, and you can't take them out. So I used to copy 10, 15 papers and then come back. read and next day go again and copy 10 or 15 papers and keep doing that for years and years. Okay, so research process has changed a lot. Okay, so I was going to begin talking about systolic architectures, and this is a term that was coined by H.T. Kung, who used to be professor at CMU in those days. I think this is a 1982 paper. You can look at the reference number 2, I think, from the textbook in the chapter. Kung is now a professor at Harvard in computer science. So the very basic idea is if we are going to be computing instructions that are essentially SIMD type instructions, so single instruction, multiple data, we are computing same thing again and again and again. So that's what the single instruction part means. That's the same thing we are computing. New data comes along, compute same thing. New data comes along, compute same thing. So, so in those days, we are now going back to 1980. Okay, so I think the best technology people had access to in those days was probably 10 micron. 10 yeah, I think so. My brain is not working with this. It should be working, but anyway. So let's see. Yeah, 10 micron, then 5 micron. Well, we should actually have those in one of the chapters, chapter 17, something like that. Well, okay, well, it doesn't matter. So, okay, so what does the systolic array really mean? So, we have a host processor. So, the host processor is slow. These specialized data paths, the so-called systolic array, is computing specialized computations so this can only compute one instruction on multiple data. So the host processor dumps the data in the first PE, it goes through some stages of processing elements, and finally the result is fed back into the host processor. So the host processor, which would be the PC, would be very slow, and these would be fast because these are specialized processors. And the reason this was termed systolic array was because this is like blood flow from the heart. So blood flows through arteries and comes back. So that's kind of what systolic means. Okay. So it so happens that the systolic designs themselves were subject to big debate, and do we really need systolic architectures? And when when students were doing project in this class in those days in late 80s, 89, 90, when I was teaching this class for first few years, we were designing semi-systolic, where the systolic itself was not considered a great architecture because it had unnecessary pipelines. So the intent was to achieve fully. So the name systolic, at least in the beginning, was synonymous with fully pipelined. So when you see the PC feeding data to a bunch of PEs and then finally result coming back, to the PC, it is implicitly assumed that there is a pipelining cut set from one PE to the next, and sometimes it does not have to be data flowing in one direction, but it is possible that the data could be bidirectional, and that is why in some of your homework early on we had seen that if it so happens that we only have one delay on this communicating edge, then the only way that we could make this fully pipelined is to so called slow down by factor 2 and then retime, so that becomes then fully pipelined, and that is one of the reasons why systolic architectures never became popular. Okay, let me put it this way: systolic architectures, with all their glory in those days, never really became popular, and people are now revisiting. After these many years, people are revisiting systolic arrays because of the interest of Google TPU. Okay, so we'll get to that probably sometime in the class. All right. So what does systolic architecture do? So the basic process involves so-called mapping the dependence graph into these systolic arrays. So the beginning point of this is the dependence graph, or DG. So we map the DG to systolic arrays. So the way I describe the whole systolic array in the textbook is I derive all the systolic arrays that were described by the original paper by H.T. Kung using this so-called linear mapping, and these were initially presented in an ad hoc way. So let us go through the dependence graph of an FIR filter. So if I start with, and we have talked about this in week number 1, 3-tap FIR digital filter. Okay, so these are the weights. So yn, the output yn is W0 times the current input xn plus W1 times xn minus 1 plus W2 xn minus 2. So for example, if you look at what is being computed here, so that would be, I should point out, so each node is computing the product, so that is W2x0. So 0 plus W2x0 plus W1x1 plus W0x2 would be Y2, and same way these would be Y3 and Y4. So the dependence graph, as we talked about before, does not tell anything about where these nodes are being computed. So we have no notion of which node is being computed by which processing element, how many processing elements are there, what time they are executed. we have no idea about any of those things. So, the dependence graph, as the name states as it is, and we have also talked about the fact that the dependence graph is an infinitely unfolded version of the so called data flow graph. So, if I represented this computation here, which is xn W0 times xn plus W1 times xn minus 1 plus W2 times xn minus 2, and if I describe that as the DFG data flow graph, and that is the dependence graph. This has, as you can see here, this has delay elements, and as I talked about before, a dependence graph cannot have delay elements because it has been unfolded infinitely. So, it is showing a part of that, but this goes on infinitely. Okay. So, the process of deriving the data flow graph from the DG dependence graph is essentially the mapping process of designing systolic arrays. So, that is really all there is. The process involves mapping the computations in the dependence graph such that we assign them some processing element where these nodes are computed, and we assign them a scheduling time at which time instances these nodes are computed. And if I can do that, then we can design a systolic array. So, and the very simple process of taking a two-dimensional dependence graph and mapping that to a one-dimensional systolic array is done by a simple linear mapping, and that is what we are going to spend all our time today talking about, mapping two-dimensional dependence graphs to one-dimensional systolic arrays. Okay. So, so this is the dependence graph is sometimes known as a space representation, because we have space of nodes just showing computing, and the process of mapping the DG to the systolic array, which we can actually say DFG, is known as taking the space representation and mapping that to a space time representation, where every node is assigned to a certain processing element and assigned to a specific time of computation. Okay. So, that is really what we will look at. So, let me just say that the systolic arrays was known, well, it was known, it was well understood by the time I had finished my PhD. So, it was certainly well understood. Okay, it was all well understood. Okay. So, the folding algorithm that we talked about already, that was developed long after this systolic mapping, and the systolic mapping was a very simple mapping, and it begins with the concept of not an arbitrary dependence graph. The very essence of systolic mapping is that the dependence graph be a regular dependence graph, and we will talk about what that means. So, the folding algorithm is a very general way of taking any well, I mean, in some sense we are taking a data flow graph, which is an algorithm data flow graph, and mapping that to a hardware data flow graph, which is a much complex process. The systolic design itself is a very trivial thing, does not require more than 9th, 10th grade math understanding. Okay. So, it is really a very simple thing. So, I heard people say they are confused by systolic arrays, but it is a trivial thing after all. Okay. So, what is a regular dependence graph? So, a regular dependence graph means that if I take a certain node, well, you can see at this node there are many things going on. So, if I pick certain node, then we can see that for a specific node we have the input going up, okay, and the weight of the filter going to the right, and the result that we are computing is going diagonally down. Okay. So, so when I identify these characteristics at every node, the input x is going up, weight of the filter or the coefficients of the filter are going left to right, and the result is going diagonally down. And that means that this particular interconnection or the description of how the input, weight and the result move in this case move up, right and diagonally down, must be same for all nodes. That is what is called regular. So, if you look at that, the pattern of communication everywhere is the same, and that is what makes it a regular data flow graph. If at this node data was going, the weight was going to the right, at some other point it was going up, well, that is not regular, because that is irregular dependence graph. So, now that we know that this is a regular dependence graph, we can describe, and if I have taken some kind of a axis representation ij, so for the input x we can describe that by a vector 0 1. So, that is going up in the j axis. So, input is described by an edge vector 0 1, the weight is described by a vector 1 0, because that is just going in direction I, going to the right, and the result y can be described by going diagonally down. So, you start here, you go right and you go down, and that is diagonally down. So, that is 1 minus 1. So, these are the fundamental edges associated with a given node, and a dependence graph is called a regular dependence graph if all the nodes have associations of same fundamental edges. So, we can call them fundamental edges if you want, but that's so all edges have same 3 fundamental edges. That is why it is called a regular dependence graph. And if we have a 2-dimensional dependence graph, we can project this to a 1-dimensional systolic array. If I started with a 4-dimensional dependence graph, I can project that to a 3-dimensional systolic array, a 2-dimensional or a 1-dimensional. The processor architecture dimensions, the architecture dimension has to be less than the strictly less than has to be less than the DG dimension. Okay. So, if the DG is a 4-dimensional dependence graph, I can map that to a 2-dimensional architecture or a 1-dimensional architecture or even a 3-dimensional architecture, because the dependence graph itself is a 4-dimensional space representation. So, we are going to map that to so when I say a 3-dimensional, so if you think about matrix multiplication, that is described by a 3-dimensional dependence graph. So, that can then be mapped to a 2-dimensional systolic array that computes a matrix multiplication. All right, okay, very good. So, now what does it really mean to map something by so called linear mapping? So, so the basic mapping is a very trivial linear mapping. And so, for example, if I have a certain node with coordinates I and j, so you can think about that certain point I j. So, we define a few parameters. So, this is let us say the certain node node x, let us say with the index which is I j. Okay. So, that is the I of x. Okay. So, now if I have this node x communicating with node y, which is and this is an edge vector E. Okay. So, that edge vector E could be any of these edges, could be going up or right or down and diagonally down or whatever. So, so that is the edge vector. So, to give you one example, let us say x was 2 3 and this was 3 5, let us say. So, in this case the edge vector would be the index of edge y minus the index of edge x, and that would be 3 minus 2 and 5 minus 3. So, that edge vector would be 1 2. So, it moves 1 in x direction and up by 2 units. Okay. These are not in scale to the units, but that is what that means. Okay. So, so we have these fundamental edges that have to map. So, we define two vectors. So, the vector P is defined as a processor space vector. This is what defines. So, what it says here, that the node at index I will be executed by processing element P transpose I. Okay. So, processor space vector means the which P e number a certain node will be executed is given by P transpose. Well, P is a column vector, P transpose is a row vector. So, this is a row vector. So, for example, if I define P transpose, let us say is 1 1, in this example x will be executed by P e number, well, we just add 2 and 3 5, and y will be executed by P e number 8. So, that means there will be a connection between P e number 5 from P e number 5 to P e number 8. So, that edge in the dependence graph will lead to n edge in the hardware systolic array by that connection that I am showing here from 5 to 8. Okay. So, how can I, okay, I do not need to take these examples, but in general if there exists an edge with edge vector E, so the edge vector E will map to a vector P transpose E in the systolic array. So, in this case P transpose is 1 1, edge vector 1 2, and that is going to be 1 1 times 1 2, which will be 3. So, that means we must have a, in the hardware systolic array we must have communication with displacement 3. 6 will be connected to 9, 7 will be connected to 10 and so on, and 2 will be connected to 5, 3 will be connected to 6. So, that is what that systolic mapping is telling us here. Is that making sense? Any questions so far? Okay. So, we are going to define one more quantity. So, I have defined the processor space vector P, which tells us which node is being mapped to which processing element, and we are going to define another vector called S, the scheduling vector, and that tells us which computation is being executed at what time. So, the scheduling vector S will tell us at which, so for example, the node at index I will be executed at time S transpose I. That's what it's telling us. So the scheduling vector defines, we already know that this index node at index I will also be executed by the processing element P transpose I. So we know the, so now by defining two quantities, by defining these two quantities, we already talked about the fact that the node at index I will be mapped to P transpose I and will be scheduled at time instance S transpose I. So because that's all, after all, we are interested in assigning where each node is computed and at what time. Essentially, the whole scheduling, whether it is a compiler or even thinking about a very primitive systolic array or folding, we are always trying to find out what node is being computed where. Okay. All right. So then we have to satisfy certain constraints, and okay. So so let me just define one more vector called a projection vector. What does the projection vector say? The projection vector says, so let's say that we have in some node ij, this is a space represent, so called space, no time associated here, space representation. I say, let's say that this is the projection vector. That means that I am projecting all these computations to the same processing element. So if you see other nodes having the same vector, these will also be mapped to the same processing element. These will be mapped to same processing element. Well, any time you see two nodes displaced by the projection vector D, so that's the projection vector D. From here to here is 2D, 3D, this is also D. So, well, so if this node is placed at index I and this node is placed at index I plus D, what does that say? That says that P transpose I must equal P transpose times I plus D, because these two nodes are mapped to the same processing element because of the way I define the definition of projection vector. All nodes displaced by D are mapped to same processing element. This is also same as P transpose times I plus 2D, 3D, 4D and minus D, minus 10D. Okay, so then this cancels out. So that tells us that P transpose D must equal 0, and that's one condition that we need to satisfy, which says that the processor vector P must be orthogonal to the projection vector D. These should be orthogonal. Okay. What does that mean? What does that really mean? These are orthogonal means if you think about all these nodes being mapped to same processing element, these are mapped to same processing element, these are mapped to same processing element, these are mapped to same processing element. But this processing element is not same as that one. This is not same. So these are all distinct processing elements. That means the systolic array is, the PEs are placed on one dimensional array in a manner that is orthogonal to this projection vector D. Is that making sense? So that means these will be mapped to distinct processing elements. Okay, well, that's great. So let's go back. So processing, so the projection vector, So, typically we begin systolic array design by saying, okay, we are going to choose a certain projection vector. From that we can then get P transpose or P such that P transpose D equal to 0. Okay. So, now so I already mentioned to you that these two nodes are mapped to the same processing element. Why is that? Well, that is because this is mapped to the processing element P transpose I, this is mapped to P transpose I plus D, and we have constrained P and D to be orthogonal. So, P transpose D equal to 0, and therefore, they are mapped to the same P E. However, there is no way that these two nodes can be executed by the same processing element at same time. If this is being executed at time unit 10, can this be executed at time unit 10? No, it has to be at a different time. But so therefore, we can say that S transpose I, so the scheduling vector then must satisfy another constraint. So, S transpose I must not equal S transpose I plus D. So, this node at index I is executed at time S transpose I. This node at index I plus D is being executed at time S transpose I plus D. So, if I then cancel out S transpose I on both sides, that says S transpose D cannot equal 0, and that is second constraint. So, that is this is first constraint and this is second constraint. Okay. So, ideally we want S transpose D to be 1. Why is that? Well, that if this is being executed at time 10, this is executed at 11, 12 and so on. So, the P E is busy. P is busy all the time. Now, what happens if S transpose D is 3? What does that really mean? That means if I am executing this at time 10, this will be executed at 13, 16, 19, etc. And that means the hardware utilization efficiency is 1/3, and that means it is going to be used in one cycle, then 2 null operations, then used one cycle and then 2 null operations. So, S transpose D should be ideally 1, implying that the hardware utilization efficiency will be 100%. So, hardware utilization efficiency is 1 over the absolute value of S transpose D. We will see that S transpose D can be sometimes negative. If this was being executed at time 10, this was executed at 9, 8. So, if the D vector goes this way, but the computations going that way, think about applying associativity to add the result in an FIR filter from left to right or right to left, and that is when this can be negative. Okay, if I change the left to right to right to left, then the hardware utilization efficiency will be 1 over absolute value of S transpose D. All right. So, we now are in the very final steps of defining a few more constraints, and then we will go through some examples. Okay, so how do the edges map? I talked about the fact that if there exists a fundamental edge in the dependence graph, then there exists a certain edge E from x to y, and then this is being mapped to P transpose x. Well, I should say P transpose Ix, and this is P transpose Iy, and that means the processor displacement is equal to P transpose E. We talked about that briefly. Now, this is going to be executed at time S transpose Ix and this is being executed at time S transpose I y, and so that means this is mapped to, in our old example, if I go back to that example of P transpose E being 3, so then we have an edge in the systolic array from 5 to 8, 6 to 9, etc. But this is saying that this node is computed at time S transpose I x, this node is being computed at S transpose I y. Now, what does that really mean? This is all going back to the same thing we have talked about in how I constructed the folding algorithm. So, it means that this result is done at S transpose I x. Now, we are assuming no pipelining. This is being used at S transpose I y. That means the number of delays on the edge in systolic array must equal S transpose times I y minus I x, which is S transpose E. So, that means that I have this edge from 5 to 8, 6 to 9, etc., but each one of these has these many delay elements placed on that edge. Okay. So, that is the number of delays, what I call folded delays. In the general folding case, is that is what it is. Well, as I mentioned before, the folding algorithm was developed as a broad generalization of the systolic mapping principles. Okay. This was definitely well understood by late 80s. Okay. So, what other constraints can you think of? Well, because the number of folded delays is S transpose E, S transpose E must be greater than or equal to 0. The number of delays on an edge cannot be negative, because that would imply non-causality. So, we must satisfy, we must choose the scheduling vector such that S transpose E is non-negative. Okay. Okay, we have simply finished all the theory of systolic array. There is nothing more, as I say. It is a very simple way to map. It's all linear mapping, so it's a very trivial thing. It's not like the general folding algorithm. In fact, think about this as a very special case of folding, or think about folding as a broad generalization of systolic mapping. Okay, so now we can go back to our example and we will walk through the systolic architectures that were presented in the original 1982 paper, in how we can take this and define different projection vectors and different processor space vectors and scheduling vectors to create different systolic arrays. Okay, so let me just go through. It will take a lot of time, but I will walk through at least a couple of examples, and then you will do some more in your homework. Okay, so I think there are nine systolic arrays in the original Kung paper. The first one is called design B1. So, we will see what design B1 does. B, by the way, name B means it is data broadcast. Same data is fed to all multipliers. This is B1 and then there is B2. Okay, so the vector D in this case is 1, 0. Okay. All right. So, what does that mean? What does this vector D is 1, 0? What does that mean? What do you think that means? 1, 0 is this way. This is 1, 0. 1 in I direction, 0 in J direction. And that means
D in the projection.
This is vector D, and that means all these are executed by one PE. So if you originally, if you recall, there were 3 rows of computations. Okay, so that's the result, and that's the input, and that's the weight. So what do you think is going on? That means all these are mapped to one PE. These, so if you think about the processor space, these are mapped to one PE. The second row is mapped to another PE. This is mapped to another PE. Okay, there are 3 processing elements in that systolic array because it's a 3-tap digital filter. Okay, so the fundamental edges E are 1, 0, 0, 1, 1 minus 1, and we are going to compute P transpose E and S transpose E. Okay, so before we do that, we need to define what are P and S. Okay, so I need to define P transpose such that P transpose D is a 0. So let's just define P transpose equal to 0, 1, and that guarantees, well, P is 0, 1. So 0, 1 times 1, 0 is 0, and I want to maximize hardware utilization efficiency. So if I define S is also 1, 0, then S transpose D is going to be 1, 0, 1, 0, which will be 1, which means the hardware utilization efficiency will be 100%. Okay, so this is 1, 0 times the S vector. This is going to be 0, 1 times the S vector. Okay, so this is 0, 1 means just take the Y element. So Y element 0, 1, minus 1, and this is 1, 0 means just take the X element. Okay. So, so 1, 0 is the weight W, 0, 1 is the weight, is the input going up, and this is result Y. Okay. So now from this mapping of the edge, 3 fundamental edges to the systolic array, now we can have a high level view of the systolic array. So now we already know that we need 3 processing elements because there are 3 rows. That's our projection vector. We are projecting all rows in one horizontal line to one PE. So let me just say these are the 3 PEs. Okay, these are 3 processing elements. Okay, we don't need to worry about those names, but the weight vector, it says weight has processor displacement vector 0. So what does that say? Weight has processor displacement. Weights are staying in the same processing element, okay, but have one delay. That's what it means. So that's the weights. Okay, so that is, those are for the weights. For the input X, let's call this is processor axis. So the input has a processor displacement vector 1. So the input is going straight and has no delay, and that justifies the name data broadcast. The result has a processor displacement vector -1. So that means these are going in the opposite direction of the axis I defined for the processing element, and that's the output Y, and has one delay. So these have one delay. So this is the high level view of the so called design B1, okay, systolic design B1. So that's what is the systolic design B1. That's the high level view of the systolic design. Now how do we relate this to something that we already know? Well, if you think about x, the input x is broadcast and is going right, result is accumulated and going left. So, if I think about at every PE, we are multiplying by a weight and we are accumulating the result, and there is a delay. Okay. So, now this circulating loop, I can think of the one delay holding that result W, and that is what that loop is telling us. Okay. So, so what does that look like to you? That does look like, so if I want to compute W0, so this is holding W0 xn plus W1 xn with one delay and W2 with xn with two delays, and that's the low level view of the so called design B1, and that is the high level view obtained by these mappings. Is that making sense? So, if we take the direct form FIR filter, use associativity to add the output from right to left and then apply retiming, move the delays from top to bottom, that is design B1. Well, I mean a lot of things that I just mentioned were not known to, well, Kung does not even describe how he got to these designs, he just says he figured out these designs. Okay. So that, well, that is how systolic computing started. So, there was the later part of this work, lots of people tried to explain by the linear mapping and by other mappings as well. Okay, so let us just go through maybe a couple of more mappings and you can read on your own. So, next design called B2, okay, design B2, and this one we start with a D vector, the projection vector is 1 minus 1. What does that tell you? What does that say? That says that if we have these output computations, these outputs are computed by the same PE. Is that making sense? So, instead of the inputs moving that way, output going this way, the output, so and you would expect, okay, so let us just complete this. So, P transpose, P is orthogonal to B to D. So, if I choose P transpose as 1 1, I know P transpose D will be 1 1 times 1 minus 1, which will be 0, and I can choose S transpose to be 1 0. So, that says S transpose D is going to be 1, which is 1 0 times 1 minus 1, which is 1. So, the hardware utilization efficiency is 100%. Okay. So, now we can go through the same mapping process to get a high level view of what the design B2 looks like, and then we will try to see if we can explain that based on all the transformations we have studied in the class. So, if I take the E for the weight vector 1 0 x and output y, P transpose E is 1 1, S transpose E is 1 0. So, here you just add the x and y, 1 plus 0, 0 plus 1, 1 plus minus 1, and here you just take the x coordinate 1 0 1. Okay, so we are done with those. at a high level, it says that if we have these processing elements, it says that the weight has the, and again if I take this as the right axis of the PE, so the weight moves right with one delay. So the weight quantities move right with one delay. Input X moves right with a 0 delay, and that's not surprising because it's called data broadcast. And output Y, as you would have expected, because this is the projection vector is going diagonally down, so the output Y is being computed in the same PE. So that's why the processor displacement vector is 0 and has one delay. Okay. So that is the high level view of design B2. Okay, so how can we then relate this to something that we can think about? Okay, now I know that's what is being done. What do you think is being done in this? Well, it's not obvious. Let me say that it's not obvious to figure out what really is going on in this high level diagram. Okay, well, we can see what is going on here. Okay, so if I draw the low level diagram, the input X is fed to all processing elements. Okay, so that's the name, data broadcast. So we have certain quantity X multiplying with weight W, and the weight W is also feeding and moving right with one delay. Okay, and then these weights are being multiplied to this, and then we are accumulating okay, so first of all, if you look at it, what we are trying to do here is, well, let's actually, this is probably a good time to talk about. So what do you think is going on here? This is really computing y3k, let's say, and y3k plus 1 and y3k plus 2. Does that make sense to you? So the way these are being computed is each one is computing a separate output. So let's say as an example, this is computing, let's say y3. What is y3? Let's start by computing y3. What is y3? y3 is going to be w0 x3 plus w1 x2 plus w2 x1. Okay, so okay. So let's say, so at the same time, this would be computing y4, which would be w0 x4 plus w1 x3 plus w2 x2, and y5 would be w0 x5 plus w1 x4 plus w2 x3. Okay. All right. So let's say that we have at this time we have x3. Okay. So at this time we have x3. What does that mean? That means that this is w0 and w1 and this is w2. Okay. All right. So think about what is going on. So in this cycle, when I input x3, previous cycles we had input x1 and x2. At this clock cycle x3, y3 will complete. Y3 will complete. Okay, so y3 will complete, and then if you want to take the output here, that will come out in clock cycle 4. So in clock cycle 3, y3 will complete, and output will be available in clock cycle 4. So y3 will be available in clock cycle 4. y6 will be available in clock cycle 7, etc. Okay, so then here w1 times x3 is completed. So w2 x2 was already done. W2 has moved on to the right. In the previous clock cycle, that was done. In the next clock cycle, when x4 comes along, this w0 will move here, and we will complete w0 x4. So in clock cycle 4, we will complete y4, and y4 will be available here in clock cycle 5. Okay, y7 will be available in clock cycle 8, etc. And here we are just beginning w2 times x3 in clock cycle 3, okay, and then 4, 5, and then in clock cycle 6 we will complete y5. y5 will complete in clock cycle 6, y8 will complete in clock cycle 9, etc. Okay, so that's why we say hardware utilization efficiency is 100%, because in 3 clock cycles we have 3 outputs available. On average, every cycle, every PE is busy. All right. Any question about this? Is very, very similar to the, well, actually a simpler, much simpler version of the homework assignment that I had given you long ago, with 1 bus and many PEs. And in that case, it was 7 tap filters and 3 processing elements. Here it's 3 tap filter, 3 processing elements. So the data is being fetched from the memory every clock cycle, and we are computing a new output every clock cycle. Any question about so-called design B2? So the final change we can make to B2 is, because the coefficients are only 3, I don't really need to. So we would need to keep feeding W2, W1, W0, W2, W1, W0, but there is no need to do that, because there are only 3 coefficients. We can put them into a circular buffer so that they are rotating inside. Okay. Any question about the systolic design B2? Yeah.
So the P transpose A should be 0. P transpose can also be 0, 0 as the vector. What does that mean? For P transpose.
P transpose cannot be 0. That means every node, all the nodes are mapped to same 0 PE, index 0. So that means that if P transpose is 0, that means that's a traditional microprocessor with 1 processing element. Everything is mapped to 1. It's a very sequential processing. That's a good thought. Okay.
Professor, won't that mean that you have just one processing element and you have to schedule things accordingly so that If it,
You have to schedule, the compiler will schedule, or you have to schedule. If it is regular, you can look at it and schedule. Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so maybe we'll go through a few more designs and we'll continue next class. So let's see the third design. Well, the so-called design F. So-called, there is probably no point drawing, or maybe I can just quickly go through some of these. I can show you. So the so-called design F, the projection vector D is 1, 0. What does that mean? All in one line, horizontal line are mapped to the same PE. P transpose is orthogonal, so this is 0, 1. That's exactly same as design B1, I think, right? Yeah, that's same as B1. So the B1, 1, 0, 0, 1. This was 1, 0. So now only thing we have changed is S transpose is now 1, 1. Okay. So S transpose D, because that number is 0, S transpose D is still 1, which means the hardware utilization is 100%. And if you go through these mappings for weight input and result, compute P transpose E and S transpose E, and then you get this weight has 0 displacement, 1 delay, input going right, processing displacement 1, delay 1, result -1, so that's -1 and 0, -1 and 0, and that's good. So that's the high level view. And if you look at the low level view, that's just the essentially the direct form digital filter with the output added from right to left instead of left to right. So again, when Kung's paper describes all this in his 1982 paper, that so many systolic arrays exist from for computing the FIR filters, but they are all equivalent. I mean, we have been talking about retiming, and by the way, retiming was the PhD thesis of his PhD student, Professor Lyserson, at when he was doing his PhD at CMU with H.T. Kung. He was then became professor at MIT after he finished his PhD. Okay. Okay. So keep reading this design R1, R2, dual R2. Read these things on your own. There is S transpose D is a 2. That means it's 50% hardware utilized. There is design. Well, let me just say these names. R means results stay. Results stay in the same PE. That means the result processor displacement vector is 0. So that's what you see here. Design R2. So that one's R1. This is R2, and dual R2. Both are 0. Sometimes it describes. Sometimes some of these flow graphs. Sometimes for some of these mappings. If you go through the book, maybe in your homework, sometimes we have to reverse. For example, sometimes instead of taking the input X up, we may take it down to make sure that the P transpose E is non-negative. And finally, the W. W means the weights stay in the same processing element. Okay, so that's, and W2, dual W2. So read all these on your own. We'll talk more about this. We'll continue this next class, talking about systolic arrays. So let me just say that some of you, the TA told me that some of you made mistake in problem set 6 in finding out solution for part D. Read the solution. Okay, read the solution. Certainly, I want to make sure you get those correct. Some of you had problem unfolding this by factor 4. Read this also. Read this on your own. Problem set 7 is due on Thursday, and I have already posted problem set 8 which is the last systolic chapter that we are teaching, and we'll complete that next class, and that will be due next week, Thursday. Okay, so don't go away. I have your graded homework, and I will give them back to you.
Yes. Obviously.
Yes. Radhika, Shubham, Shruti has not completed. Huh? You can give it to her, okay. That's fine. Chirag, Manu, Rajat, you probably missed this one class maybe last week. Jason, Abdul, thank you, Singhi,